The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. San Francisco Giants baseball, past, present, and future. The host is the esteemed Michael Duca, and he is present and accounted for in Arizona. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm not steamed in Arizona. I'm baked.
But as you are, it's not baked. It's actually, this is the first week that you've had really decent spring training weather. Probably better than others where it was too hot. It's a mild 80 degrees.
It's been very pleasant here. We've had, Monday it was in the 60s. Tuesday it was in the 70s. Wednesday it was cloudy, almost overcast, but 80 degrees. And today it's mostly cloudy, but the sun is peeking through, and it's about 83. So, this is just about perfect down here. 80 degrees in Phoenix is like 70 degrees anywhere else because of the low humidity.
Yeah, it's dry and it's really nice. It's what all the people like about Palm Springs weather. It's just great. I envy you the chance. What I don't envy, you've been on the road for the better part of a month and a half, on and off. At least for the most part, you were in New York.
Twice,
living out of a suitcase in Arizona. You had your wife with you on the New York trips, so it was more of a, you were working a little bit, but it was more of a vacation, I think. This is no vacation for a number of reasons.
No, this is 34 straight days of work, including a couple of double headers.
Whoa. And it's not just getting up and going to work like most of us are used to, at the same routine. You're centered right in the middle of where you need to be, and you commute.
Well, if you look at the Valley of the Sun as a clock face, I'm at 1 o'clock. Salt River is 2 o'clock. Hill Stadium is at 3. Hohokam and Sloan and Tempe Diablo are at 4 and close to 5. And then over at 8 o'clock is Goodyear, and 9 o'clock is Glendale, and 10 o'clock is Peoria, and 10 o'clock off the clock face is Surprise.
Well, and that's not just going from town to town. That's finding the park, finding a place to eat, all the logistics that go with it. And even if you're accustomed to the different parks, you lose track. All cities basically look alike, and
and things don't stay the same from year to year. I'm sure everybody who's listening is going, oh, boo-hoo, poor guy, he has to spend 5 weeks at spring training, and it's true. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. But, yesterday I went to Tempe Diablo Stadium to see Clayton Kershaw and Shohei Ohtani face each other, and that was my first trip there in 2 years, and in the 2 years since I've been there, they moved where the media parks. Which I found out after
you got to hear Clayton Kershaw talk smack.
Well, I didn't get to hear it. I got to hear people who came back upstairs talking about him talking smack. So. Okay,
well, it's good that he has this competitive spirit going. It'd be better if he weren't a Dodger, I guess.
Yeah, well, next year he's a free agent, so we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime. I get where he's coming from. He basically said he didn't pick us, so I could care less. I wish him luck.
Right. A lot of luck he wishes him. We know that.
Well, he struck out. I'm sure you've seen this on. I'm sure they televised it or ran it on the Sports Center.
On YouTube, it's all over.
He struck out Ohtani on a curveball that's still breaking. It was filthier than the desert. Yes, it was filthier than the desert itself.
Oh, nice. In a sense, it's nice that kind of thing gets play, and it makes for an interesting breakup to a lot of mundane in spring training. The best that could come out of a day, really, is that nobody gets hurt. If you stop. And, of course, we know the worst, because if you win, you won. You're playing scrubs. Doesn't matter. If you lose, we lost. We're playing our scrubs. But injuries are the important thing. And with that, let's check into the Giants situation. And you can give us an update on their health. How are things going on in that direction?
So far as I know, it's been a pretty quiet camp in that sense. They are slowly easing Melanson back into the pitching situation. And beyond that, everybody seems pretty much okay. Brandon Belt appears to be fully recovered from his fourth concussion, which cost him the last 2 months of last season, and really more than that, because he's been upfront a little bit like Kevin Love was this week about the fact that this concussion caused behavior changes, and he had to fight several months of depression and was treated for it. And these are things that can happen with a brain injury, and a concussion is a brain injury.
I hearken back to Matheny, the current manager of the Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
Was a top-notch catcher in the National League. Giants get him. He served them well for a while, and he succumbed to that. He didn't succumb, but his career certainly succumbed to the effects of concussions. And that could be something that could be a day-to-day thing. Any day they may pull the plug on him and say, hey, this is for your own good. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Matheny quit on his own, but with advice. I think, one of the things that we have to kind of pay some attention to here, to be honest with you, Ralph, is pitchers are throwing harder for whatever reason, whether it's mechanics, whether it's instruction, whether it's chemical. Pitchers are throwing harder. And when you throw harder, the foul balls come off harder. They also tend to come off a little flatter. And, I have advocated for a few years, we're changing so many things in baseball with metrics. We're measuring everything, where starters aren't allowed to sniff the sixth inning anymore, and five-man bullpen, is the way you finish a game, and we have to have a 19-degree uppercut in the swing in order to match the downward angle of the pitch and launch it square. And we're studying all of this stuff. We're not paying too much attention yet to concussions. And I have had this theory for a few years that I wish somebody would try out, even if they tried it out in spring training. And that is to extend the catcher's box and move the catcher back a foot. Now, that also moves the umpire back a foot, and the umpires have to be trained. They have to get their eye trained to calling breaking pitches in a different way, because the pitches are all going to be caught out of the strike zone if the catcher is a foot further back. But if he's a foot further back, all those foul balls that strike the forehead and the top of the head will go over him.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say retrained. It's almost like they didn't know, or they don't know now, that it's not where the catcher catches the ball, it's where the ball goes over the plate. What doesn't
I understand that, but what here? Let's be honest and realistic here. The human eye is tracking a moving object and trying to guesstimate as best as possible based on thousands and thousands of pitches of experience where that pitch was when it crossed the front edge of the plate. And after 3 to 29 years of visual muscle memory, if you move the catcher back a foot, your ability to kind of mentally, instantaneously confirm that that's a strike because of the fact that he caught it 3 inches below the knees goes away, because now he's going to catch it 13 inches below the knees.
Okay. I have an interesting question for you.
And honestly, this is not going to be a difficult thing to train. It really isn't. With all the virtual reality capabilities that we have in baseball now, you just get the guys into a virtual reality situation for maybe 3 or 4 hours. And you give them the view that they would have from a foot further back, and you have pitches, and you show them pitches, and the system knows whether it's a strike or not, and the umpire calls it, and eventually his behavior will get shaped to call it based on that point of view rather than the point of view he's used to having. Baseball has moved umpires. In the past,
if the technology is that good that they can call the pitch, who needs the umpires? That was
no. That's not what I said. What I said.
I know, but it's what I'm asking rhetorically. Someone might come back with that answer. You say, well, the system is set up that it knows what a ball and a strike is.
No, I'm saying the system is fed pitches that are known to be balls or strikes.
Okay.
There's a difference. I'm not saying the system is evaluating the pitches. The pitches are pre-known.
But do we have the technology to put in place a camera or something that can literally know when the ball's in the strike zone, not the strike zone that some umpire has? John Doe's strike zone is a little high, as we know, that kind of thing. People bet the over and under based on that sort of stuff. And
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with Tim McClellan's strike zone is known to be high, and Eddie Montague's strike zone was known to be low. I don't have a problem with that because it's known. The players don't have a problem with that because it's known. The reason that good pitchers get hit in the first inning is not because they're adjusting to the mound, and it's not because they're developing a feel for their breaking ball. It's because they're learning what the strike zone's going to be that night. And all they care about is that the strike zone that they get in the top of the first inning is the same strike zone in the bottom of the ninth.
Well, it seems to put a lot of power in the umpire to determine.
It's always been there. It's always been there. That's a fundamental aspect of the game. The arbiter will,
well, would it be a plus to have technology make it an even playing field on that regard?
I don't think so. I hope that never happens. I know Eric Burns is a huge proponent of that, thinks it'd be a great idea to have technology call the pitch and then signal the umpire that it was a ball or a strike in an earpiece, and then the umpire raises his hand or not. That's turning a $200,000 a year employee into a puppet.
Good point.
I have no use for that, and I don't think umpires are going to have any use for that. I think if you do that, you're going to see guys retiring. You're going to wind up with young rookie umpires who are willing to take the job, but probably not going to have a lot of job satisfaction. You're not going to see many guys do it for 30 years.
Okay. May I ask you this? In the rule book, does it still say that a strike is from the armpit to the knee?
No. Yeah, it hasn't said from the armpit to the knee since you and I were kids. It is from a point midway between the shoulder and the waist. to the back of the hollow of the knee, which is an impossible thing to judge. First of all, the midpoint depends, of course, greatly on how far
the individual. Some people are built differently. Their legs are shorter. Their torso, right?
Yep. And not just that. I mean, some guys hit straight up, standing straight up, and other guys stick their butt out a foot behind them. That changes where the midpoint is, because the midpoint doesn't go up and down. The midpoint tilts when you bend over.
Right. What they used to say about Joe Morgan, he didn't have a strike zone.
Well, it almost felt that way. Pete Rose, too. I mean, Pete Rose would crouch down to the point where his elbows could touch his knees, and then as the pitch came in, he would stand up. Well, terrific. How the hell do you call that strike zone?
Good.
It's a moving strike zone.
And was it intentional? Was that the way he intentionally, was that part of his way of confusing the umpire? I don't know.
I don't
Probably
know.
not.
Here's my answer to that. He had 4,000 hits. If he was good enough to get 4,000 hits while jerking the umpire around,
natural ability that he really didn't have. He wasn't a speed burner by any stretch. He was a hustler.
No.
But
in every sense of the word.
And no question. But it probably put an extra step. But that extra step wasn't Veda Pinson-like speed by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not by any stretch of the imagination. He would finish third in a match race with Bobby Tolan, that's for sure.
And you know what's interesting? He has a higher, I don't know if it's more doubles or more a higher OPS plus than George Brett, for instance. He's thought of because of that one thing Mickey Mantle said. He said, well, hell, if I just went for singles, I'd have 5,000 of them by now. Ha, ha, ha. But gave him
the response.
He wasn't just a singles hitter, is what I'm saying.
I hear what you're saying, and my response to Mickey is if he'd have just drunk singles, we'd still have him.
That's right. He'd be on his third liver, but we'd still have
possibly. But if they were just singles instead of doubles and triples, he'd probably still be with us.
Yes.
So I mean, I'm not a huge proponent of putting too much technology in the game. From what I see, the biggest complaint that players and other uniformed personnel, coaches and managers, have about baseball today is not the effort to speed up the game. They pretty much support that. The biggest problem they have is that, to a man, they will tell you the best way to speed up the game is get rid of instant replay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or you could get rid of
it. It's also a false
get rid of the picture I have is the umpire looking up to the press box, waiting for the TV producer to tell him when to start the game. Now, I don't know how much time is lost on that, but it's got to be.
Rarely any. Here's how that works, and it's really quite simple. There's a clock now, and the clock counts down. As soon as the inning ends, the clock starts at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. That gives the TV affiliates 10 seconds to roll into their commercials. They are allowed to show 1 minute and 45 seconds of commercials and no more. And then they have 10 seconds to roll back in.
Okay, so that's not holding up the game.
So I don't think it's holding up the game at all. What's holding up the game is, first of all, there's been limited enforcement of violations of that, because what's supposed to happen is The umpire is supposed to signal one more warm-up with 25 seconds on the clock. That warm-up is supposed to be thrown by 20 seconds on the clock. And by thrown, I mean the pitcher needs to be in his motion. And then the batter is supposed to be in the box at 5 seconds. And I want to tell you how seldom that happens. That happens about 3 times a game out of all the at-bats. Now, they try to game the system in a zillion different ways. They're putting both feet in the box before 5 seconds, and then they step out to adjust their batting gloves that have come loose on that interminable walk from the on-deck circle. And then the first pitch comes in, and it's a called strike, and they step out to tighten their gloves that came loose from taking a pitch.
You must remember Mike Hargrove, who's the grandfather of all of this.
The human rain delay.
Right.
I remember Grover very well. Nice guy. I like Grover. You know, I've met him, you know, when he managed the Indians for all those years. He's a great guy. But, you know, it was interminable. Nomar Garcia-Parra, who had a whole routine. He had to pretend, if you slowed it down, he wasn't actually tightening the Velcro. He was kind of turning his wrists over and tapping the backs of his hands against each other. But he did each hand 3 times, and then he stepped out and he kicked his toe into his shoe on each foot 3 times, and then he would step back into the box and take the next pitch and go through the routine again.
Almost inviting the pitcher to give him a haircut.
It's a mental crutch. They call it a routine, and it gives them comfort, and that's great. That's perfect. I understand the whole concept of mental routine. It's exactly like basketball. If you shoot free throws, you need a routine. You should bounce the ball twice or 3 times or 12 times, but it's the same every time. I get that. But make your routine something that doesn't irritate the other 21 people on the field.
And actually, it's the other 41 people, because you're irritating your own teammates as well. You know?
Well,
you meant that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Plus coaches and fans.
Yeah. So it's, you know, once again, it's not the length of games. Nobody cares about the length of games. Nobody. I have never heard anybody say, I'm not coming to a game again because this was 3 hours and 24 minutes. What I have heard is, you know, I just don't know if it's worth it to come out here and watch so much nothing happen. And, you know, first of all, that's a little bit of a misnomer. The ball is actually in play in a baseball game for more time than it is in a football game.
But, you know, baseball fans take great joy in that between the pitch time to talk to who's next to you, analyze what's going to happen, try to, you know, think about memories. This reminds me of that and this and that. It doesn't have to be like basketball where the action is going all the time. If baseball's like a chess game, you're thinking. You're not moving that chess piece, but you're thinking, and that's part of it all. That's part of the joy of it.
It is. The question is whether or not young people have been properly taught that, because young people have shorter attention spans, and they're used to nonstop entertainment, and they're used to being visually stimulated all the time. So they need to be taught what there is to see. I used to do this, Ralph. I used to tell people, you know, people would say, oh, I don't know how you can work in baseball. It's so dull. It's so boring. And I would make them a challenge. I'd tell them, you buy 2 tickets to a game, and I will sit next to you. And if at any time after the first batter of the game, if there's any point in the game after that where I can tell you all the possibilities before the next pitch is delivered, I'll give you a $100 bill. Never, ever had to make good on it. Ever.
Well, that's very good. Very, very good point.
There's a reason that baseball was the last sport to have a effective and realistic simulations in a computer because it's the hardest one to simulate because the complexity is enormous.
Right. The ball can be hit in so many different ways, at so many different speeds, in so many different places it can come off the bat in conjunction when ball meets bat and the wrists are in a certain way. I don't think Pete Rose ever hit two balls exactly the same.
Probably not.
Exactly. I mean, we have no way to measure that, but and not just Pete Rose, anybody. I don't think a play is duplicated literally from the way the second baseman takes the first step to the way he comes over the bag to the precise moment ball meets glove from the shortstop to the way he turns to get out of the way of an incoming runner who's never come into a base in precisely the same manner, etc.
You know, I'm going to give you an anecdote that kind of explains a lot here. Many years ago, when the Milwaukee Brewers were still training in Chandler, Arizona, so that was more than 20 years ago now, okay. They were playing the Oakland A's, and my wife was down with me for a few days in spring training, and I had a credential and she did not, and so I went up to the press box, or I went up to the ticket window, and I said, "Give me the best seat you have in the stadium." And they said, "Certainly, it'll be $10," and they handed me a ticket in the front row directly behind home plate. I mean, literally directly behind home plate, so close that you could put your feet up on the backstop. So I brought my wife down there, and I said, "This is a special seat, and so you have a special assignment today. I'm going to come down in the fourth inning, and I'm going to see what you've learned. I want you to spend the next 3 innings only watching from the backstop to home plate. I just want you to watch the catcher, the umpire, and the batter. Nobody else."
Okay.
I came down 3 innings later, and I said, "What have you seen?" And she said, "Batters cheat." I said, "Yes, they do. But what do you mean?" And she said, "They're constantly trying to look back and see where the catcher is." "Yes, they are. What else did you see?" She said, "Well, I noticed that the catcher moves at the last second." I said, "Yes, he does. What else did you see?" And she said, "The batter changes where he's standing on every pitch. You always think he's in the same place, but he moves 1 foot an inch. Back, forward, sideways, the front foot, the back foot." And I said, "That's right, because he's anticipating a fastball or a breaking pitch." I said, in 3 innings of just watching the catcher and the umpire and the hitter, you now know more about baseball than 95% of the people in this building.
Boy, I just learned something about baseball right now. My mind's eye, a batter at he's dug into that position, and it's the same position every time. He's got, marks set in the ground. Not true, based on just what he's saying.
He
moment
digs
to
in.
moment in the box.
Sure, he digs in, but the question is, does he plant his foot squarely in the hole, or does he use the back edge of it to push off against, like the pitcher pushes off against the rubber? You know, they always say the pitcher's in contact with the rubber. He's almost never in contact with the rubber. I mean, if you think about it, the pitcher pitches in front of the rubber.
But he rocks back on the rubber for that split second when he kind of...
Line yourself up at first base, straight across from third sometime. and train your binoculars on the pitcher's back foot, you will find that they dig a hole in front of the rubber. And they push off against the rubber. They're not on the rubber. They're in front of it, and they're using the edge that's buried as their contact point. Tim Lincecum, when he was struggling so badly with the Giants and just couldn't throw strikes, he actually got to a point where he pitched off the side of the rubber, the first base edge. His toe was in contact with the first base edge of the rubber. He was completely not in front of it because he was trying to cross. He was having trouble throwing the ball where he wanted to, and he was trying to get pitches inside so he would get all the way over on the first base side and face towards the third base on deck circle and start his windup faced in that direction. And then because his pitches were drifting, he was trying to keep them inside and not having them drift out over the plate. And of course, the problem was, if you watched him, was how he landed. Because he was pitching from the side of a hill, he wound up pointing towards the first base on deck circle. And wherever your landing foot points, that's where you're throwing.
The ball's going.
Yeah.
Just like in tennis, a tennis serve is basically all that. You just have to point the leg in a different direction. You don't have to. That moves everything. That moves your hips. And hey, congratulations to Timmy. He catches on with Texas, and I think they have a role for him, or at least they have a role out there. Can he seize the moment? What do you think?
They have openings. I have a suspicion that he will wind up closing for them. And if he does, I think he's going to be the biggest bargain of the spring signing season.
And he'll be the biggest bargain if I pick him up in my fantasy league based on what you said, and I will. He'll be a great bargain for me. I will ask you this. Are you still glowing with the prediction that Duca would push the envelope? I don't think you expected him to make this good an impression, but he is really pushing the envelope in the Giant camp.
He is, and he's doing it from the right end of the batting order. He's starting games and facing major league pitching. You know, you don't learn very much about a young player when you bring him in the fifth inning and he faces guys he's going to face all season long at Double-A. But,
yeah,
he's
if
got...
If you're going to go to an exhibition game, and you want to see the stars, now that's not to say that it's fun, preseason game, I should say, that preseason games aren't fun in the last few innings because you do get a glimpse of the future. But if they're giving him early at-bats, they are opening the door. And I think his defense has been superb. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's an athlete. Or as they'd say, he's an athlete. But, and he is. What can I tell you?
Yeah,
You called that very early on.
Yeah, I will tell you this. If he's not there in San Francisco in March, he'll be there in May.
Okay.
Barring injury,
yeah.
Of course. You know, and the other thing is if he plays well enough, if he plays well enough to make the team, and they tell him, look, we're going to send you down to get you 2 months of at bats at AAA because we just don't think we can get you every day at bats up here. We want to keep you sharp. Then it also is going to depend. Those 2 months are going to depend on his attitude towards that. You know, if he takes that as a challenge and goes out and hits 370 at Sacramento, more power to him. You know, if he goes out and pouts and starts out hitting 200 for the first month, then he's not going to be back in May.
Okay. 3 keys to the Giants as I see him right now. Posey, how's he coming along?
Well, his first game action was less than a week ago. So I would have to say too soon to give you a definitive statement on that. I'm going as
no
of right
physical
now.
No physical setbacks, and as far as
not so far. But I haven't seen him myself. I'm going to do all 3 games this weekend in Scottsdale. So next week I will have a much better idea for you of my own opinion rather than expressing someone else's that I've read.
Okay. May I ask about, you mentioned the name Melon Khan. I may not be pronouncing that right, but he had a disastrous year last year, coming back from surgery. And I've heard, just from what I've read, it's going along okay.
Yeah, I expect that it will be fine. They found something completely unusual when they went in to do the surgery. They had to release the fascia on his forearm in order to take the nerve out and reposition it. That's just a complete anomaly. That's a freak occurrence. The nerve usually does not get bound up inside the muscle. And as the muscle was contracting from this fascia being too tight, it was also causing pain, obviously, because the nerve was in the wrong place.
Right. And that's not happening now.
Now it's not happening. It's been, they opened the fascia, they released it, and then it takes some time for the muscle fascia, which is basically the covering. If you think of, if you've ever looked at or cooked a pork tenderloin, you've seen that silver skin that goes over the outside. That's the muscle fascia. And it's there to keep the, muscles, living muscles are not like pieces of meat at the grocery store. When an animal goes through the slaughterhouse, it's put in a cooler for 2 days to chill down and to firm up before they can cut it into steaks or whatever they're going to cut it into, even primal cuts, because a living muscle is kind of like Jello.
Didn't think of it in those terms. And the third, Bumgardner. How about that for a brain cramp?
I saw him pitch one time this year, and he was in mid-October form. He was lights out. He pitched to 9 batters in 3 innings, retired them all, and struck out 4.
That is very good to hear.
Yeah.
Good news. You'll know more next week, and we'll chat again.
Yeah, I think that Bumgarner, I expect to see a heroic season out of him. It's his free agency year. He's been the biggest bargain in baseball so far, and I don't think he expects to remain the biggest bargain in baseball. I don't think he's going to, hold the Giants up for Fort Knox. It's not his style. I think he's one of those guys who will tell you, if I can't live on $20 million in the bank, I don't deserve to. But at the same time, if everybody else is getting $30 million a year to pitch, who pitches at his level, I don't think he's going to sign for $9. He's going to want something
I could never blame a player for getting precisely what the market will demand. What he can get, God bless him. I don't blame Barbra Streisand for getting as much as she can for every concert she sings in, and that's the American way.
They only offer it because the owners are making money at it.
No question about it.
What I think you will see here is if, let us say, let's just pick a name out of the hat. Let's say the Yankees offer him 4 years at $130 million. And the Giants come back and say, man, our salary structure is such that we can't offer you more than 4 years at 100. I think he'd take the 4 years at 100 to stay in San Francisco. I don't think the extra 30 is going to make the difference for him. But I don't think he would take 4 years at 70 because the Players Association will rightly say, look, you're you're setting a bar for other players, and you're setting it too low.
Yeah, well, whatever the Players Association did to help implement a soft cap, I think that was the worst bargaining decision since Miller passed.
Since the owners gave up, I think it was the worst bargaining decision since the owners willingly gave up arbitration.
Oh.
Because nothing has affected the salary structure of baseball more than arbitration.
Very good point. But this is going to, in the long run, help turn the pendulum back in the other direction.
We'll see.
Let's face it, if the Yankees can only spend so much money without the risk of a penalty that every dollar they spend is going to cost them $1.50, how do you interpret that? How would that go over in Supreme Court when they're trying to renege on what is it that baseball has, the antitrust thing? Eventually is it going to come down to that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. It's going to be interesting, but basically what happens here, you have a perfect storm here. You've got the first year of this cap combined with the certain knowledge that next year is going to be the biggest free agent crop ever. You've got Manny Machado, you've got Clayton Kershaw, you've got Madison Bumgarner, you've got Bryce Harper. Gee.
And and there is that factor
and you have shrinking TV audiences, and you have TV contracts that are not continuing to grow at an idiotic rate. So you have a confluence of a whole variety of things going on here that, they're market forces.
You've got Boros the agent who's right smack in the middle of it.
Well, yeah, you always have Boris the agent right smack in the middle of something. He has a lot of clients.
He's got about 18 free agents between this year and next year.
Right, and he has a lot of clients because he does well by them.
Right, but if all things are headed towards what with the shrinking TV contracts and what with this, that, and the other thing, if all things are headed for a down market, wonder how he's going to be perceived and looked at.
Well, I don't think he's perceived and looked at in a very favorable light right now.
By future players who are coming into, first-round draft guys picking an agent right now, Boros is kind of on a downslide, I would think.
Well, it's possible. He's also, he's not exactly a spring chicken.
That's true.
He's getting to the point where it's going to have to be his agency that does this more than it's him. And, that remains to be seen. Can you recruit guys who genuinely don't care what somebody thinks of them? That's Boris's strength. He just doesn't care what anybody else thinks of him. He's going to go out there and do what he thinks is the right thing for his players, period. To hell with baseball, to hell with the salary structure, to hell with the players' union, to hell with everybody. He's going to personally represent his players as best he can. And not care that, 30 billionaires don't like him.
But again, if 30 billionaires set the salary structure, it can only be X amount paid out. And that's a soft cap. I think that's going to come to some sort of litigation.
Well, again, I just don't know what. Again, as I said, this is a perfect storm this year. You've got all that going on, and you've got the four teams that have spent profligately in the past. The Yankees, the Cubs, the Dodgers, and the Giants are all in a situation where if they want to be able to participate in the free-for-all next year, they have to get under the cap this year. They have to, because the penalties for not doing so are draconian. The penalties for not doing so are 100% tax on the salary over the cap, loss of compensatory draft picks if you lose a free agent, loss of international slot money, and loss of draft picks. And that's just crippling a team going forward.
How is it that the union agreed to that contract going in?
You'll have to ask Tony Clark.
Okay.
I think a lot of
I'd like
players
to ask
are asking Tony
about
Clark.
the 500-plus ball players who are not included in the pension as well. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look into Doug Gladstone's writings. He wrote a book called The Bitter Cup of Coffee, and there's a horrible thing going on about a lot of guys who have contributed to the game who are not being taken care of properly. And
yeah, there's points to be made on both sides there. The uniform players' pension plan and the non-uniform players' pension plan are probably the two biggest defined benefit plans left in existence in America. Everybody else lives with 401ks or nothing. People who work in Major League Baseball, and that includes front office personnel, non-uniform personnel, still have access to both a 401k and a defined benefit pension plan that is paid into only by the employer. And the players that you're talking about played at a time when that didn't exist. Now, for good or for ill, they played at a time when it didn't exist. And, that was also a time when players went in and negotiated their own contracts. There weren't agents yet. Maybe they had a lawyer advising them, but oftentimes if they did, they just found that they were not, no contract at all was proffered. In the days of, infamously, Branch Rickey told Ralph Kiner after he'd hit 56 home runs, was it?
I think it was.
Kiner came in and asked for a $5,000 raise, and Branch Rickey told him, "Son, we finished last with you. We can sure as hell finish last without you."
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have Doug come on and talk to you about this. It goes deeper than this. These were pre-1980 players, such names as the Stork, Jimmy Quails, guys that just didn't get 4 years. Now, in 1980, the pension, Major League Baseball, and the union, it's an association now, it was a union then, agreed to compensate former Negro League players who were denied, obviously, access to the major leagues, and they gave them small but consistent pensions for their Negro League years. But they neglected to compensate players who actually played in the majors, who did not have the 4 years in, and they are ending up with a crock of nothing. And
well, I guess one case to be made there is they had an opportunity to play at the major league level, and they didn't last very long. Even today, if you do that, yes, you're going to get a partial pension, but you're not going to get much of one. I can tell you the
Well,
non-uniform
let me tell
players.
you this. If you come up and play, you get your name in a box score without even having to come up or throw a pitch, you get access to full medical benefits. You have to contribute some for the rest of your life. So the unions, the pension fund, what they have, they've got billions of dollars. They rightfully took care of Negro League players who didn't have a sniff of the major leagues, and they're not taking care of poor and indigent players in a lot of cases that should be given a piece of the pie. The union was built on these guys' blood, sweat, and tears. That's
well, and the one thing that I will add to that is that while those guys may not be being taken care of with pensions, BAT, the baseball assistance team, does a heroic job of helping guys, including
given
those
how
who
underfunded
do have
they
pensions.
are.
Yeah, I mean,
given how underfunded they are, and given the wealth of both the major league owners, who it isn't their call; it's the pension, it's the union's call on whether or not these players get the bucks. But given the overwhelming amount of wealth that they have, they need to do it for social reasons. They just need it for humanity reasons. Call it what you want.
Well, I don't disagree. I can tell you, I have a friend who I'm not going to name, but who was a major league pitcher for 10 or more years, who needed hip replacements and, didn't have a spare $100,000 lying around. It took him about a year to really get everybody's attention at BAT and work his way up to the top of the stack. But when he did, they gave him a significant amount of financial support to get his hips replaced.
Again, how many people needed their hips replaced? God bless him. I think I know who he is. I think he's a mutual friend of ours, and he's well deserving. But how many others are well deserving, and how many just need some money for monthly to get by monthly? And there's another thing: what little they give these players isn't passed on to their survivors. So you have wives of these players, of the widows of these players, who are suffering. And again, BAT's, by theory, just needing the organization of BATs is a slap in the face.
I guess it is, but I'm gonna tell you something that you probably don't know about BAT.
No, I don't mean the players needing it.
No, neither do I. I'm going to tell you something you probably don't know about BAT, because I didn't know it about BAT. As many people who listen to this know, my wife is a member of the front office of the San Francisco Giants. She works as the manager of guest services. She came home about 3 months after she took on the full-time position and said, "Wow, I just learned about this thing called BAT today, and we're eligible for it. And we're not just eligible for it while I work there. Since I've worked for a Major League Baseball team, we're eligible for assistance from them forever."
Whoa.
So,
it would be it's a wonderful thing. I'm not taking anything away from them, but obviously they can't take care of everybody.
No, they can't. And there's I mean, you get into all kinds of questions here.
I know if I sound like a horrible socialist, and excusing the word, Everybody should be taken care of. Everybody, whether they play baseball or not, we should all get medical care. It shouldn't be a privilege. It should be, this is a country that's based on that. Social Security. That has to, not just a word.
Well, we'll see.
Well,
that's all I can say. We live in interesting times. I do not want to turn this into a political discussion.
I don't.
We will alienate half the people who listen, no matter what we say.
I alienate half the people just by waking up in the morning.
Well, see,
so
we're already down to half. I don't want to alienate half of them.
Okay. Well, the half that we have with us really loves us, and I want to thank them for sticking with us, even with our wild ideas. And I'm not saying
and me too.
My wild ideas. So,
well, I expressed a pretty wild idea today about moving the catcher back from home plate. So
that's a hell of an idea, but that'd be a lot easier for people to swallow than taking care of those who need taking care of. Probably.
Yeah.
Tyko, you are fun.
All right, I got to scoot.
I learned so much from you every week, and this is going to be a nice season. I want you to be careful on your trip. When do you break camp, as it were? And
I have the last game of the spring in Surprise on Sunday. I think that's the 25th. I'm not positive. It's a noontime game, and then when it's over, I jump into my already packed car, drive to the L.A. area, and then I get home Monday, and I work Tuesday at AT&T Park.
Wow. And you don't just work Tuesday. You work like 6 months.
Well, yes, but I have Wednesday off. There's, the Giants are playing up in Sacramento on Wednesday. There's no Major League games. So I get Wednesday off to hold my fantasy draft for the league that I've been the commissioner of for 15 years. And away we go. We call it In Your Dreams.
Okay. Well, you've inspired me just by telling me that Timmy has a chance to be a closer in Texas. You've inspired me to make a bold move and pick number 44 of the Texas Rangers up in my fantasy free agent. He's out there as a free agent. We've already drafted, so I can pull him off the garbage heap at your advice. I'd pull Duca off too, but I've already taken a flyer on a guy named Andujar of the Yankees. So,
okay. Okay. Well, I assume that somebody in your league picked up the Braves' hot prospect, and I presume that somebody has taken a long shot at Fernando Tatis Jr. of the Padres.
Oh yes, just recently he beat me out on that one. That would have been a good one. That I was busy trying to pick up one more relief pitcher that could get me some saves in my 5x5 Roto League with Yahoo.
Yeah, our league is extremely complex. We count caught stealings as negative points. We count strikeouts for hitters as negative points. We count double plays on defense. We try and do what we can to get defense into the game so that you just don't go out and rent the team full of
It's a very
DHs.
hard part of the game to quantify.
Yep, it is. And so we, speed tends to correlate positively with defense, and double plays a little bit with defense, and outfield assists.
Mm-hmm.
So we count all of those.
Interesting. Now that we're talking about this. My friend Alan Blumkin brought something up. With the New Age stats brought on by Bill James, you can see a player reach a lot of fly balls as opposed to a player who doesn't. You would assume he has more range. But doesn't a lot of that depend on the pitching staff he's playing behind? Is it a fly ball pitching staff? Is it a ground ball pitching staff? Does that affect the number of double plays, for instance?
Yeah, I remember the first time I met Bill, and I talked to him about the fact that, I thought the Giants infield was underrated at the time, and he said, why? And I said, well, they lead all of baseball in double plays. He said, well, that's what they lead all of baseball in putting guys on with less than 2 out.
Right. Right, so you could take stats and you could spin them around and your eyes could spin in your head.
Absolutely. And that's why, there has to be a limit to metrics. Metrics are useful, metrics are interesting, metrics are important. But, you don't watch the computer during the game.
Unless you're a bench coach.
Well, you still don't watch the computer. You refer to it.
Okay, I got you. Thank you, Michael. Good show.
All right, time for me to go. Off to Goodyear.
Good, be careful.
I'll try.
Right.
My definition of being careful on an Arizona freeway is driving as fast as I can so I have the least exposure to the wing nuts.
Get there, get on and off, whatever it takes. But it isn't just it isn't just Arizona. It's Florida.
Oh, no, it's not.
Whenever you talk to people, L.A., San Francisco, the Bay Area traffic trip nowadays. It's absolutely craziness. And I don't know where it isn't. It always was in New York. So I don't know what we're coming to, but we're getting there fast.
It's not too bad in Butte, Montana.
That's true. And, you laugh. Montana's beautiful. There are places.
It is. The first time I went there, the first thing I said when I got there, by God, the sky is bigger here. It just looks deeper and farther away. It's an amazing experience.
Like Wyoming, in that sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. This
All
has
right.
been a good show. If you're listening out there and you enjoy our offerings, I would implore you to box up some lightly used children's books, take them to the Head Start program wherever you are, and give kids a chance to read, develop an imagination, get their noses out of computer games, and learn, become school ready, and succeed. Because if you don't get that head start going in, you're going to fall behind. So get kids' books, lightly used children's books, bring them over there. You'll feel good. I'll feel good. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. We'll be back next week. San Francisco Giants Baseball, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko. The host again was Michael Duca. Adios, everybody.